here right now?
I don't see Erica.
Well, she went out, so I'm hoping she's trying to get back in.
Yeah, I sent her a text.
We're live on YouTube.
Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Good afternoon. My name is Latrina Foster, Director of the Fulton County Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Disabilities. Where throughout COVID-19, we're dedicated and committed to ensure that you have access to mental health and developmental disability services. We want to ensure that the citizens of Fulton County and throughout the state of Georgia recognize triggers within themselves, are able to manage their emotions during these unprecedented times. So what we're doing is we released a series called Cope and Hope. So today we're here to provide you with more strategies and techniques to ensure that you take care of your mental health at a time that it is very important that we recognize and take care of ourselves mentally as well as physically. I have 3 panelists with me today that will walk us through a journey, and hopefully when we're done with this journey, we provide you with the necessary equipment to stand on the battlefield and ensure that your mental health is a priority to you. In order for you to be able to take care of others, it's imperative that you first focus on you. Not a selfish statement, it's reality. You have to be well in order to take care of others. So here we go. We have Erica Williams Walker. She is a licensed professional counselor. She is a program manager with the Fulton County Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Disabilities, where she has served our community for over 12 years. Thank you so much for joining us today, Erica, and we look forward to hearing from you momentarily. In addition, we have Africa Cotton. Africa Cotton has a wealth of experience when it comes to the judicial system and the intersection between individuals with mental health and substance use disorders. Africa Cotton has been with the Department of Behavioral Health for over a year. However, she has served in the judicial realm for 5+ years. Africa has a master's degree in social work, and we welcome her and her level of expertise to walk us through this journey today. Then we have Dr. Raquel Watson. Dr. Watson is the medical director for the Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Disabilities, where she shares her knowledge and medical expertise within our population of intellectual and developmental disabilities. In addition, individuals that are dually diagnosed that have a mental health disorder as well. So we welcome Dr. Watson, who has been with our department for over 12 years as well. And we thank you for your commitment and dedication to the individuals that we serve. So today, ladies, we want to help people through COVID-19 be able to manage.
Erica, go.
Okay. And so today we're going to talk more about strategies that people can put into place as they're helping to help them be able to cope with what's going on today in the midst of this COVID-19 event that has, taken us all by surprise, and everyone is doing their best to deal with the events of today. And so today, we just want to talk through some strategies and being able to recognize triggers, emotions, and behaviors as well that people are experiencing, and just how to work through those without, them escalating into a situation that you have no control over. And so we have to, make sure that we talk about how there has been a significant increase in domestic violence due to people having to shelter in place because of, rising unemployment, uncertainty, being at home with, your children all the time, and just your routine has been changed significantly. And so again, we just want to talk through some of the strategies that people can put into place while they are experiencing this COVID event. And so again, all of this is new territory for us, because typically people are able to get stress relief by going to work. Like you're there with your family, then you go to work. So you're having a break. Also, people were able to go to the gym to work out. And then as far as for children as well, children had home and then there was school. And so we were able to break those typical routines by, well, breaking the routine of just being at home with your family. You were able to do some other things. And now we're with our families all the time and our loved ones. And so with now out having that release, that is how tempers can flare, anxiety can increase, and then people can be on edge. And so what is really important as we talk through these strategies, what's really important to remember is that you have to practice a lot of these strategies while you're not in the middle of the event. And so kind of thinking through as we're giving you all tips and tools to use, thinking through like, what are some things that I can use before it gets to this point? And so first, we're going to talk a little bit about triggers. And so a trigger is something, an event or a situation or circumstance that causes you to have a particular reaction or an emotion, whether that be positive or negative. And so obviously, if you see something that you like, or you're able to buy something that you like, the emotion that comes from that is, you're happy. But for these exercises, we're going to talk more about those emotions or behaviors that are considered more negative or challenging, that's more difficult for people to deal with. So again, a trigger is a circumstance or a situation that causes a reaction or an emotion. And so it's really important to recognize what your trigger.
Did we lose Erica?
Yes, we did. Go ahead, Ms. Foster.
Okay. So as Erica was explaining, just being able to recognize triggers that prompt negative emotions. And
Dr. Watson, can you pick up from there?
Okay, so I just unmuted. Okay, so just to pick up where Erica and Ms. Foster left off, it is important to recognize our triggers, and that will help us to sort of try to implement some actions or some other activities that we can do before we're exposed to those triggers so that we can prevent a negative outcome. I think that Erica may be back with us, so if I miss something, please chime in, Erica, because this is probably more a question for a therapist to answer. But I think if we can already sort of rehearse certain scenarios that we know might come about, we can already have our reaction planned so that we're not caught in the moment and then trying to deal with whatever that trigger is in a position where we're not prepared for it. Erica, I'm going to ask you to go ahead and come back in if you can, because I want to make sure we're giving all the tools.
Sure. And so I talked a little bit about triggers. And so with emotion, so the trigger causes a particular emotion. And so that emotion is going to be anger, sadness, anxiety. You could just be annoyed. And then a way that for you to know that you're experiencing a particular emotion is because you go through some type of physiological change. And so your heart is beating faster. You could be sweating. You could be fidgeting, but you know within yourself when you're not feeling okay, like something is about to come out. And so at that moment is when the behavior comes. And so Behavior is going to be when you are actually acting out on that emotion. So it's something that you're going to show externally to other people. So you could be yelling, crying, fussing, and where you just lose control to the point you may start throwing things or even fighting. And so all of those are not all of those, but most of those are considered, a negative response to a particular trigger or an emotion. And a lot of the times, the way that we respond to things, those are learned behaviors. Those are some things that we learned earlier on in life. A lot of the times we do things based on how our parents responded to things. And so if your parent was a yeller, 9 times out of 10, you're going to be a yeller too, until you recognize that may not be the best way for me to be able to address this. And so what's really important, once you recognize your triggers, just really being able to think through what could happen if I respond this way. Because when we act out of our emotions in a negative way, we end up having to go back and apologize to our loved one because we may have said something that we didn't really want to say, or we may have said something out of the way to our children that we didn't really want to say, that again, you have to end up going back and apologizing for. And so kind of think through, these are not, I don't want to respond in a way that's going to make me have to go back apologize, or I just feel bad, period, that you don't even want to apologize because you've done certain things over and over again. And so you don't want your apologies to get to the point where they're empty and they don't mean anything. And so we just kind of want to talk through, building a toolbox. And so you think of building a toolbox, you have multiple things in that toolbox that you can use whenever you need them. And so toolbox strategies, just whatever you want to call them. And so one of the top things on the list has to be self-love and self-care. Because if you're taking good care of yourself, then you are better equipped to deal with things as they come along. And so what that self-love is going to look like is just being really self-aware, like the things that learning your triggers is a part of self-care, right? Because one of the things with a trigger is you've allowed someone to cause you to react a certain way. And where you don't have control over what that person does, you have control over your own responses. So that's a way of being able to take care of yourself. And so we say this often, and Latrina, our director, says a lot, press pause. So when you feel like, when you know that you've been triggered, and because you know yourself, you know what's coming along with that. And so press pause, meaning just stop and don't do anything. Just stop in that moment and don't do anything, because you don't always have to respond to what bothers you. And another important thing to do is to take some space, walk away, go outdoors, just take some space, meaning you're going to remove yourself from that present situation. Counting to 10 slowly. 1, 2, 3. You can count the other way, 10, 9, 8, but just taking your time and counting, that calms you, that takes a moment to calm you down, and you're focused on something else. You're focused on counting as opposed to what you were about to do in that situation. Also practice some deep breathing techniques. And so slowly. So when you think about when you're blowing out, think about that you're kind of blowing away that emotion, you're blowing away that behavior that you could have potentially acted out on. So you're blowing it away. And so do that several different times. And so just again, continue to build your toolbox. So going for a walk or a run around the neighborhood. So of course, these are all of these suggestions that we're giving. These are things that you can do now while we're in the middle of this event. And so walking around your neighborhood, get moving, start cleaning up. I have someone that I know, when they get upset, they start cleaning things. And so you're accomplishing 2 things at once. You're giving yourself a chance to calm down, and you're getting your house clean. Organize a closet, organize the junk drawer. I think I mentioned this the last time as well. Go outside, wash your car. So it's just a lot of things that you can do outside or inside that's just gonna refocus your attention on something else. Is it a book that you purchased that you haven't read yet? Is that something that you can do? Trying out a new recipe as well. Listen to music, get moving, dance. Is it a two-step that you haven't practiced in a while, or learn a line dance that's online that you could, tap into? So log on to YouTube and look around for some different things that you can do as well. So relaxation techniques, gardening. Have you been interested in gardening? That's something that my daughters have been doing. They've watched some YouTube videos, and so they've been practicing gardening, something that they've never done before. And so that's another way to relax and learning the new skills. And so also, while you're on YouTube, if you just have a person that usually has a lot of energy and you can't get it out, get on YouTube and do some kickboxing. That's a way that's gonna, you're gonna be tired. That's a way to relieve stress. And so you definitely won't be thinking about what triggered you by the time that you finish a kickboxing routine. And then also, again, these things all go back to self-care, right? Because you're relaxing, you're taking care of yourself, you're exercising as well. Also, journaling is a really important thing to do, because you're writing your thoughts down, those thoughts that you may not necessarily want anybody else to know about, just writing those down, writing those thoughts down, and also taking the time within your journal to do some positive self-talk. So what are some things that you don't say to yourself enough? Like, you got this, you're good at this, you're beautiful, you're smart. So writing those things down within your journal are great, as well as just saying those things to yourself in a mirror. I talk to people, I've encouraged people in the past, like, get some sticky notes and write positive things down to yourself. Write down some positive affirmations and stick those up on your mirrors. And again, these are things that you have to practice doing while you're not in the middle of the event. And if all else fails, seek therapy, seek counseling. And so I'll run those numbers off to you right quick, but we'll also, those numbers are also on our website, and we'll make sure that we talk about them again before we get off the call. And so Fulton County, again, provides behavioral health services for children, adolescents, and emerging adults. And so the number for children, adolescents, and emerging adults, that number is 404-612-9339. And then for our existing behavioral health clients, the number that they can reach is 404-730-9626. And for any new client that is seeking behavioral health services, that number is 470-230-0840. And so that's just my initial talk about some strategies. I want to bring in the other ladies to be able to talk a little more about coping skills during COVID-19 times, as well as educating themselves on what are some circumstances that can come from not necessarily with struggling with dealing with those things. So Africa, because she is over our judicial area, she can talk to you a little more about some things that people can do, someone who may be newly getting released from incarceration. So just looking at another side of ways that people can cope during this time.
So Erica, before we transition over to Africa, I just wanted you to kind of share with the listening audience just a little bit about down and up thoughts, just as we encourage them to engage in self-care. I think it's important that people recognize what down thoughts and up thoughts are. So if you just share with our audience kind of how that can precipitate either negative or positive behavior.
Yes, so absolutely. So your down thoughts are the things that you think about. So when somebody upsets you, and so the down thoughts are when you're kind of thinking back to things that may have happened in the past that you never expressed to the person. And so you think about, this is a time that I need to tell them how they made me mad 2 years ago, or how I never said anything about this or said anything about that. And so almost kind of pulling up old baggage and focusing on that. And that ended up being the things that come out of your mouth and say that to that person. And so those are down thoughts. And so that's something that
So those are your up, right? So those are the
I'm
thoughts
sorry.
that fuel.
Yeah.
No. So
Yeah.
those are the thoughts that fuel you up.
Okay, gotcha. So yeah, so those are the up thoughts. I'm sorry, I mixed them up. And so those are up thoughts. And so meaning increasing your behaviors, increasing, really escalating you even higher than you may not necessarily need to be in that moment. And so those are going to be your up thoughts. And then your down thoughts are going to be something that calms you down, that kind of brings you back to reality, and that I love this person. I don't want to have this big argument or blow up with this person. I want to be able to talk to them in a productive way and express myself more effectively. And so ultimately, when you're dealing with strategies, then you want to focus on the down thoughts and expressing yourself based on down thoughts as opposed to up thoughts, because those up thoughts are things that we talked about earlier that you end up having to go back and apologize for or make amends for to your loved ones or your family. So if you focus on the down thoughts, the things that calm you down, that make you remember why you're in that relationship, or make you remember why you love your children so much, or why they bring you so much joy. So focusing on those thoughts are better than the up thoughts.
That, and I'm sure that the listening public appreciates that as well. So I have a question. I'm curious. I know that the jail systems are working really hard to ensure that they reduce the population and reduce it in a safe way, so that we're not causing alarm to the public, but they're reducing it in a safe way where individuals, perhaps their sentencing is almost up, and so therefore they may release them, people with very low offense crimes as well. And so I know some people are very concerned when it comes to domestic violence. And if I was a victim of domestic violence and my abuser was incarcerated and now they've been released, will I know? I know in the past, usually they are notified. What is the current process around that, Ms. Cotton?
So the Fulton County District Attorney's Office has a department called the Victim Witness Unit. And the Victim Witness Unit, their job to notify all victims of crime of anything that happens in their case, whether it's an upcoming court date or even an upcoming or pending release of someone who is incarcerated. So although a lot of our offices are shut down at the moment, they're still continuing to work remotely. And so they are calling all of the victims and letting them know if there is a potential release. They are calling all of the victims and making sure that if there are any upcoming court dates, that they are aware of that court date, and they will also join them on that virtual court as well. And so if a victim is concerned at all about a release of an inmate, then they can definitely reach out to their victim advocate and express their concerns. And that's what the District Attorney's Office and the Solicitor General's Office. And then also there are a number of agencies within the community that if they are unable to reach their victim advocate, they can reach out to different agencies that can help them. There is the Georgia Coalition Against Domestic Violence. There is, you can also call the crisis, the Metro Atlanta crisis line. There's partnerships against domestic violence. There is the Women's Resource Center to end domestic violence. There's the International Women's House, and that agency really focuses on people from various cultures and various backgrounds. And so if you're wondering, okay, if I make this call, they may not understand my background, they may not understand my culture, reaching out to the International Women's House is a really good resource. They definitely have people on staff that speak multiple different languages. And so that is a really good resource. And so those are the things that victims can do. We also want to be aware that although Fulton County Jail is reducing their population, the police are still making arrests. And so we don't want people to be under the impression that if they commit a crime, then they can get away scot-free. The police are still making arrests.
So let's talk a little bit, shift gears. If I've been incarcerated, say for the last 5 years, and so now I'm being released because it's time for me to be released. My sentence is up. And so now I'm transitioning back into this world where now I'm asked once again, shelter in place. How are people responding to that? What are some strategies that you may have for someone that is making that transition back into the community, a community that looks very different than it did prior to their incarceration?
Right. So, and that transition can be challenging. It can be challenging in a normal situation, but it can be even more challenging in this pandemic, where they're going from jail, where they are, sheltered in place, and now they're returning home and they have to remain sheltered in place. So thinking about one, communication is really huge. We want to make sure that we're communicating our needs to our family members. So identifying, where am I transitioning to? Am I going back home? Do I need housing? Am I going to family? Am I going to friends? Am I going to a transitional home? So where am I transitioning to? If they are returning to family, then taking a moment and understanding that although your family are thrilled to see you, they've learned to adjust to life without them being there. So we have to come back and realize, okay, so I'm coming into an environment where, my family may have had to make adjustments while I was gone. So coming back to the family and trying to understand the new lay of the land. So, okay, what happens now? And spending this time to kind of get to know each other again. So, you've grown and changed, while you were away, your family has also grown and changed. So this is a time where you would spend time with each other doing bonding activities. So sitting down, talking, watching a movie, and not just watching the movie, but discussing it. So that way you're learning, how this person, your family member, whether it's mother, father, sister, kid, how they feel now. And so, and doing things, and we're saying bonding activities. You don't want to initially start off with things that are very competitive and very divisive, because as Erica mentioned, you don't want to fuel those up thoughts, those things that's going to escalate a situation. You want to make sure that you're maintaining calm as you're transitioning back into the family unit. And then I know immediately upon release, people want to get back into the swing of things. You want to get employed. And so right now there is, we want to say pause, because right now things have slowed to a stop. There are resources out there, but there may not be as many resources as there were before. So grocery stores are hiring, warehouses and things like that, they are hiring. But you may want to just take the time to take care of yourself. just kind of readjust back to being back into the community. So you don't necessarily, everything doesn't have to happen right now. Take that time to, transition, and then reach out for help. If you want, reach out for employment. And then I know also transitioning back into a family unit where things may be stressed. There may be economic stress. There may be financial stress. There may be additional stress having to add an additional mouth to feed. But there are community resources that are still helping. There's Crossroads Ministries. They're giving out meals, Safe House Outreach, First Presbyterian Church, In Town Collaborative Ministries, the Lutheran Church of the Redeemer, Action Ministries. There are a number of community resources that you can Google, either on the Fulton County website, or you can go to Partners for Home. They have a list of agencies who are helping out during this time as well. For emergency assistance for individuals that are seniors, we have the Fulton County Community Action Authority. There's South Fulton Senior Services and North Fulton Senior Services and the Council on Aging. So there are resources available. We just want to say, just, take some time, and as you are transitioning back into the community, learn your family again and how to reach out. And I also want to point out is that the Public Defender's Office has really good social workers there who are working on behalf of their clients. And so reaching back out to the Public Defender's Office, I know once released, you kind of want to distance yourself from all legal matters, but reaching out to those social workers, they have a team of social workers that are always on hand and willing to help. And then you can also reach out to the Fulton County Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Disabilities. And if you want to come in for case management and therapy sessions.
Thank you, Africa, for those great tips. That's something a lot that people don't hear about a lot. Or what are some things that I can do to get reacclimated and kind of fit myself back into my family who has gone on with their lives while you may have been away. So I think those tips are really great for that. And so as we continue to talk about, various segments, I think we want to bring Dr. Watson in to talk some about physical well-being, and during this time, what things that people can do to make sure that they're well, and also focus some on our, talk to us a little bit about our individuals with developmental disabilities. Like, this time has been difficult for them because with our clients, they're accustomed to going to training centers every day where they're working on various skills. And so right now they're stuck at home with their families, their routines have been broken. And so definitely talk a little bit about what are some strategies that they can put in place, as well as, what does that process relate to? Is there anything else that we can learn about? What are some things that we can do during this time when we feel like we've lost something as well?
Okay, so let's first talk about the way individuals with disabilities, with developmental disabilities, tend to process loss, like loss of their regular routines. There are people who play important roles in their lives that they have lost contact with, lost that daily routine. They may even experience the loss of a loved one to illness related to the COVID-19. They may have now see where people who were constant, maybe even a caregiver, maybe somebody they shared mutual caregiving responsibilities for, who's now been in the hospital for 3 or 4 weeks. They don't understand why they're gone. So often our individuals tend to process those types of losses in much the same way as we process grief. So one way to help us to, I'm sorry. One way to help us look at that is maybe to understand the grief cycle and how we typically process grief. So I would like to talk for a minute about the stages of grief. There's a psychiatrist by the name of Elizabeth Kubler-Ross who developed these stages of grief and introduced them in her book, Death and Dying, back in 1969. Originally, this was developed to talk about how people who receive a terminal illness diagnosis would process those stages of grief. And actually, to this day, it has sort of evolved. So now we actually know that we can apply that to any type of loss, whether it's a job loss that wasn't planned, divorce, loss of a loved one, and in the case of our individuals, loss of other things that are important in our lives. So those stages of grief would be 5 stages that begin with denial. The second stage is anger, then comes bargaining, then depression, and then acceptance. So for a minute, let me just walk you through that grief cycle. And the first stage, which is anger, the first stage is denial. So that's that stage where we're in disbelief. We don't want to believe it. So we just kind of deny, like, this is not really happening. This is just a bad dream. And sometimes that is the brain's way of putting in place that defense mechanism that just allows us to not think about it for a minute, and allows us time to then process. So we often go through that stage first. Once we get through that stage of disbelief, and now we begin to understand, oh, this did really happen, then what happens is we might proceed then to that stage of an intense emotion, which is anger. We get angry. We might get mad at the person who left us. Like, how could he or she leave us like this? We might get angry with the doctors, like, how come they couldn't save them? We might get angry with the person, with ourselves, like, why couldn't I do something to stop that? We might even get angry with God or whoever our higher power is. So we kind of, at that stage, we're needing somebody to blame, and so that comes with that anger stage. And sometimes after we kind of get through that and we're processing that anger stage, then we get to the stage of bargaining, like, Lord, if you just let this not be true, I'll change my life, I'll do things differently. And you go through that thing, like, and you even may start to question yourself, like, maybe if I just hadn't let them go out to that grocery store, then they wouldn't have gotten this thing. If I had just talked them out of it, or we had just followed the rules of shelter in place, maybe this thing wouldn't have happened. So all of those kinds of thoughts and emotions begin to run through your head through that bargaining stage until you finally get past that and start to believe, okay, we've gone through the denial stage, we've gone through the stage of being really raged with anger, and then the truth starts to set in, and so then we might become depressed. We get sad. We may just have spells of crying, where we just we don't want to be bothered with anybody. We may become withdrawn. We may sleep more or not be able to sleep, have intense sadness, being really tearful, until we finally get to the place where after feeling like I have no longer reason to live, my reason for living is gone, my whole way of life has changed. Now we finally get to the point of acceptance and realize it's actually not something we can change. So while accepting it doesn't mean now we feel all better and it's all gone, but we do begin to then be able to process it in such a way that we can start making plans and think about, what is my life going to look like going forward? How can I get back to something that looks like normal? And sometimes it's also important to remember that that sounds like a neat, tidy schedule where we start with denial, then we go to anger, and we move through all those stages on this timeline. Well, you know, in reality, it doesn't always act like that. That's why we refer to it as a grief cycle, because some people will cycle back through some of those stages. Some people actually might move straight from being in denial to being angry or to being depressed with skipping over some of those other stages. And in fact, some people may get stuck in one of those stages, and those are the times when that grief can become what we call pathological in terms of an unhealthy way to move through that grief. And that's when it's time to really maybe seek some help, joining support groups or seeking individual therapy that can help us really to process it in such a way that we can see ourselves moving on with our lives. And I think, Erica, you did mention also like how we may look at how our individuals process grief differently, and they do. They often, we tend to, in our efforts to protect our loved ones who might have intellectual disabilities, we forget that they process grief a lot like we do, though there might be some differences. So some ways that we can help them to cope with it is, remember, those common misconceptions that they don't really experience grief because they don't really understand it. People with intellectual disabilities, they might get too upset if we talk to them about it. We know better than that now, so we realize that they do respond to grief. They can understand if we talk to them, and we should talk to them. Talk to them about the things that are happening. Talk to them about the person that they may have lost, so that we keep those memories alive. We can understand our individuals and know how they let us know when they're sad or when they're grieving. We might notice that they're seeming more sad, they're having more crying spells, they're sleeping, they no longer have any interest in things that they used to do. Like if they love music and love to dance, they're not even interested in those things anymore. They may experience more anxiety, they may experience sleep problems, they may express that they're fearful. They have nightmares and things like that because they're fearful now that other people and things in their life are going to disappear. So we need to recognize that they do think. Sometimes they can't express that to us verbally, so we have to be in tune to them and recognize those behaviors as maybe their expressions of grief. So how can we assist them with their grieving process? So again, we want to provide honest and accurate information for them. We don't want to get too deep because we don't want to overwhelm them with the information, but we want to make sure that we provide support for them to be able to process that information. Allow them to be involved in, whether if it's a death of a loved one, allow them somehow to be involved in that process when we're planning for a memorial, which also looks different to us these days. So however we're going to do that memorial, allow them somehow to take a role in that and make opportunities for them to express that grief. Some ways we can provide reassurance and ways for them to remember their loved ones is to maybe help them make a memory book, look at pictures, do activities that make an opportunity for the family to talk about how things used to be different in our lives, how it looks now, and how it's going to look going forward, so that they can be, we can engage them with the family's process to move forward. Did I hit all the points that we were talking about? You can't hear me? Uh-oh.
We hear you.
Okay. Okay, so some of the other things, let's see if there's some other things that we might need to to look at. We talked about the stages of grief. We talked about some strategies to help our individuals get through grieving processes and understanding that they process most losses just like we process grief. Some things that caregivers can do when they feel that trying to help their loved ones get through this, that if their own feelings, emotions, and triggers are being brought up, is once again to revert back to some of the things that Erica talked about in terms of self-care, making sure we're trying to get enough sleep and to shore up our defenses so that we can be available for them, so that we're even able to participate in some of those activities that we've talked about. And I think that during the last discussion, we did talk about some activities that we could do, some, either watching movies together, things that make us laugh, things that make them laugh. So if we know our individuals and know the things, their likes and their dislikes, we can maybe try to provide opportunities for them to participate in those things that they like. Music is one of the things we find that is almost universal. So we can share some things like that, have dance contests at home, things that just kind of lighten the mood, things that can be done outside, so that when we're getting tired of being sort of sheltered in place and cooped up in the house, that we can get outside and do some activities together, or provide something that they can do that allows us some time to get a break while we can still kind of keep our eyes on them. So those are just a few of the things that we can maybe look to for some coping strategies for ourselves and our loved ones during this time.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Watson. All of those tips were great. Thank you for walking us through the grieving process, and for people to understand that every stage is not nice and neat and packaged, that you can recycle through stages repeatedly through that process. And then also just some strategies for caregivers as well to use during this time. And so we have come to the question and answer portion of our panel discussion. We need to see if we have any questions that have come up from the listening audience.
Hi, Erica. First, we had a question that somebody wanted you guys, you and Africa mentioned a number of services that are available. They want to know if you could repeat those services that are available.
Sure, I'll be happy to do that. And so Fulton County provides behavioral health and developmental disability services. And so we have our children, adolescent, and emerging adult services. And so we have locations that we're typically at, but right now everything is taking place by telehealth. But the way to reach the children, adolescent, and emerging adult services is by calling 404-612-9399. And then also we have services for adults. And so right now, we only have one location that's open one time a week, and that is for in-person services, only for people that are existing and have medications or need refills. And so those people, if you're already in those services, the number to call is 404-730-9626. And then also for anyone that's new to behavioral health services to Fulton County, if you're an adult, you can call 470-230-0840. And I know we've talked some about our developmental disability services. And so again, they are basically holding services right now telephonically, to where we're calling existing individuals on the phone. But certainly if anyone is interested in gaining access to those services, that the number to call for more information is 404-613-6385.
If anyone has a question, please use the hand raising feature.
That was good, Erica. There was another question that was regarding the cost of those services. People who are looking for those services but feel as though they cannot afford them. What types of support or services are available for those people?
Are you speaking of the behavioral health services or the IDD services?
They're speaking of both services.
Well, I'll let Dr. Watson talk about the IDD services, but the behavioral health services we provide those services to residents of Fulton County, regardless of your ability to pay. So if you don't have money, that's okay. We will still provide those services to you. Just call and we can set up an intake appointment.
Okay, so for DD services, there are a couple of ways that it can be self-pay based on somebody's ability to pay. If they can pay self-pay, they can. But for those people that don't have those types of resources, there's a grant and aid that's through the state. There's also a waiver, well, a now waiver, one called a now waiver, one called a comp waiver that's provided by Medicaid. So if you call that number that Erica gave, we can give you the information as to how to access the state through our region to begin the process of applying for a waiver.
Okay. Another question that we have is, why is it so important for a victim to seek help or escape from regular incidents of violence from a spouse or significant other during these times?
Why is it important to seek help?
For a victim to seek help or escape from regular incidents of violence from a spouse or significant other.
Because they're exposing themselves to harm, and we want to make sure that they are safe, as well as anyone within the home is safe. And so we don't want the shelter in place to be a time in which they say, well, I can't leave, so I'm just going to stay. Whether it's during the pandemic or outside of the pandemic, if you can reach out and seek help, we definitely encourage everyone to do that if you're in an environment that is not safe. The unique thing that comes with the shelter in place is that you're isolated. And so you don't have that regular contact with the outside world. You don't have that regular contact with family. And so you are left to kind of only depend on who you are sheltering in place with. What we want the world to know, Fulton County, who's ever listening, is that you can always reach out. There's someone always on the other end of the phone that is there to offer help for you.
Another question that we received is, can uncontrolled fear and anxiety in adults impact the emotions and the mental health of their children?
Yes. So children are like little sponges. And at that stage of their development, we model the behavior for them. And so oftentimes sometimes parents can ignore unintentionally a child's, how they're dealing with the pandemic or any sort of situation that may produce fear, anxiety, or even anger, because we think that children are highly resilient. They are. However, we are the blueprint in which they learn how to deal with the environment and to deal with others. And so how we handle the situation is how the children are going to learn how to handle situations. So we want to, if you have some anxiety, Sit down and talk with your child about it. I have a little anxiety about this situation. How do you feel? And encourage them to share their emotions instead of shutting down their emotions, because you may feel like there's nothing to do. But giving them some sort of sense of safety. Children also obtain their sense of safety from us, so they can express their anxieties about what's happening now, and just talk through some things. So this is what we're going to do. Thank you for sharing your emotions. Yes, it may be a scary time for everyone, but this is how we're going to handle the situation.
As we know, over 10 million people have filed for unemployment. The question that comes up is, how can you control anxiety and fear when the bank account is nearly empty and you can't see employment in your future, at least for the next few weeks or longer?
That's a great question, and not one that's easily answered. And so I think the best solution to that is just tap into your resources. So Africa talked about, Googling and looking up some places that you can find that have food pantries and things to that effect. And also there are still some agencies, some companies that are hiring. A lot of the restaurants are still hiring, like restaurants that typically do delivery services. And so I think the thing to consider is all is not lost. I may have lost this particular source of income, but what are some other sources of income that I can acquire? So like your pharmacies are still open. So Walgreens is still open. The restaurants are still open. And so maybe having to find another source of income by doing something different during these times for businesses that are thriving, like Walmart's are thriving. So there are different companies that are thriving right now, and you may just have to, during this time, get a job somewhere else.
And then
One other thing-
also, that may not be, so because schools are out, there may be single parent households where the parent is unable to get a job because they don't want to leave their children unattended. And so you have to utilize other skills. So calling your utility and asking them for an extension. This isn't a situation that's only affecting one person. And so they know that they have to make arrangements for so many other people. So because of that, then they're more likely to give you, an extension than if it was a single isolated incident. So reaching out and to the utility company, to your landlord, and explaining that, right now I'm not able to do this, but this is the plan that I'm hoping I will be able to do in the future.
Mhm. And you can call your mortgage company, you can call your car note company. A lot of them are making extensions of maybe 60 to 90 days where they'll put those payments on the end of the loan to give you some relief there.
How can you help teens, particularly seniors who are dealing with disappointments about missing rites of passage events such as prom, graduation, end of the year trips, because of the need of social distancing and isolation?
And so I'm dealing with that myself in my own home. My son is a senior in high school, and so just keeping those lines of communication are lines of communication open to where you're allowing them an opportunity to express how they're feeling and express their disappointment in not having an actual graduation and prom. And so and so there are a number of websites or groups that have popped up on Facebook that are dedicated to seniors. And so those people have been able to give parents different ideas of like some ways that they can celebrate their seniors at home through doing virtual meetings and things to that effect. But I think the biggest thing is really allowing them the opportunity to express their disappointment and finding some alternative ways to celebrate them that may be, just not as traditional as the graduation party. So some people have been having like virtual graduation parties, Zoom parties. A lot of the schools are even doing virtual graduations. And while they're not literally getting to walk across the stage, they are celebrating their seniors. And so I just think being able to tap into those different avenues and talking to their friends, or even talking to other parents to see what they're doing. Like, how are you celebrating your senior, or how is your senior coping with these times? And so just kind of making those connections on some different things that can be done. And so that was our last question. And so we want to thank everyone for joining us today. We apologize for the technical difficulties that we've had off and on. Of course, with technology, sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And so I really want to tell Africa Cotton and Dr. Raquel Watson, thank you for participating on this panel with me. And we look forward to reaching out to the community again in this mechanism. If you all have any other questions, please send an email to us at social, SOCIAL, at fultoncountyga.gov, and we will certainly respond to your questions. But again, thank you for joining us, and please take good care of yourselves and stay healthy.
Mm-mm.